Downtown LA is under a curfew, and the LAPD says it's starting mass arrests in the protests against President Trump's immigration crackdown. The mayor is describing widespread vandalism, and police say they arrested 200 people yesterday. LA now has more U.S. troops deployed there than currently in Iraq and Syria, with 4,000 National Guardsmen and 700 Marines sent in. And now more protests are breaking out across the country, including New York City, Boston, Chicago, and Denver. Let's get right to Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman at the scene. Matt, what's the latest?
Hey, good morning, Ken. Well, the curfew here just lifted. Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, saying that the city had reached a tipping point, that there were about 24 stores that had been looted in recent days, and they did not want to see that continue happening. That is Governor Gavin Newsom saying in a statement now that he calls the deployment of those federal troops you see behind me a brazen abuse of power. The protests, which have rocked downtown Los Angeles, spreading across the country in response to the Trump administration's immigration crackdown.
Hands off our students!
From Boston, Seattle, and D.C. to Milwaukee.
No Trump! No ICE! No fascist USA!
In Chicago, a car driving through a group of demonstrators. In New York City, police and protesters clashing, officers pushing protesters back. While the majority of protests have been peaceful, in Los Angeles, for a fifth consecutive night, mounted police officers swarming protesters as that curfew kicked in. Governor Gavin Newsom claiming Tuesday that democracy is under assault, requesting a federal court block President Trump's unprecedented military mobilization.
Donald Trump's government isn't protecting our communities. They're traumatizing our communities.
LA Mayor Karen Bass issuing a curfew for downtown LA that could last several days, hoping it'll stop vandalism and looting of businesses.
Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew, and you will be prosecuted.
But protesters continue to pour into the streets of downtown LA. The LAPD has allowed several hundred protesters here to meander pretty freely right down the streets of downtown Los Angeles for several hours now. The one thing they have not allowed them to do, descend down to the 101 freeway. And when hundreds of protesters briefly blocked traffic on the 101, police pounced. Late Tuesday, we spoke with LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell. Do you need the help from the thousands of federal troops?
No, they're on a separate mission. Our mission.
You don't need their help, is what you're saying.
We have a protocol in place for doing what we're doing today, and that's we mobilize the department or parts of the department. We've done that, and then to request mutual aid. We did that last night. We brought in members of 14 different police agencies from throughout Southern California. They are supplementing our officers out in the field, doing a variety of different assignments, but crowd management and crowd control is a big part of that.
Later, a demonstrator telling me that one of her family members was taken by ICE while at the grocery store.
They don't say anything. They don't call family, let anybody know what's going on. You just got to find out in the news if your loved one's missing.
And Diane, it's important to note that most of the protests that we've seen, and the vast majority of protesters, have been absolutely peaceful here. And that's one of the reasons that LA's police chief also telling me that he does not expect us to see Marines or National Guard troops in the streets here interacting with protesters. He says that will remain the jurisdiction of local law enforcement, with the LAPD in the lead. Different tack being taken by Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. He announced late last night that they are deploying the National Guard to handle the anticipated protests we'll see there in the coming days. Diane.
All right, Matt Gutman, thank you. And for more, let's bring in Democratic Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove. She represents California's 37th district, where these protests and immigration raids are taking place. Congresswoman, thank you for coming on. How do you think the curfew went on its first night?
I think this was incredibly successful and an important thing to do. Look, California is has the largest immigrant population in the country. That's why we are the fourth largest economy in the world. We know that immigration and immigrants are important to our community and our economy. That's why folks are out in the street. But the curfew was for 1 square mile in a city that is over 500 square miles. So I want to share that so you have context about just how contained these protests are in a city as big as Los Angeles.
Now, before the National Guard and Marines arrived, how well do you think the LAPD was handling these protests, and how do you think it's going now?
So before Donald Trump descended onto Los Angeles, we were actually having a weekend of pride celebrations and graduations. ICE was coming in and raiding worker centers, elementary schools, saying that they were going to graduations to pick up young people and their families. And that stoked fear and concern, which was why folks decided to go out into the streets and protect their neighbors. We did not ask for the National Guard or the Marines to be deployed. I want to say, that deployment is in violation of the Constitution. It was not requested by the governor. And B, even though there are over 2,000 deployed, there are only a couple of hundred that are actually on the streets protecting ICE and federal buildings.
Now, President Trump campaigned on immigration and mass deportation. So what's your response to those who say this is what the American people voted for, and the president should be ensuring that these ICE agents can do their job safely?
I don't think anyone wants to have the U.S. Army or the Marines come in and enforce civilian law, because that is not what they are supposed to do. We are not a city in chaos. He did run on immigration, but let's be clear. He also asked Republicans to kill a bipartisan immigration piece of legislation that was on track to get passed and signed by Biden. What he has also done is defunded, grants and community-based organizations and agencies that would actually support us having a real immigration reform support, like more judges, more asylum application centers, et cetera. And this is not what anyone asked for. They didn't ask for their neighbors and their friends and their coworkers and their children, also who could be U.S. citizens, to be detained and deported.
So, Congresswoman, the majority of these protests are peaceful, but the mayor's describing widespread vandalism, clashes with police. So how do you recommend getting this under control, if not the National Guard?
Well, if the National Guard and the Marines would leave, we would probably have peace. But let's be clear. Folks are out in the street protesting against an administration that they have lost faith in. Because he is so antagonistic towards the Constitution, the rule of law, and democracy, folks across the country are rising up and saying, we don't have faith in this administration. We do not trust Donald Trump. So these are going to continue, and they should be peaceful. I have been to a virtual community meeting in my district. Folks are scared. They are angry. They have resolve, but they understand they have to protest peacefully. California delegation has said if anyone is out there acting violently, they should be arrested and we will hold you accountable. So we understand what is at stake. We also understand that Donald Trump wants a narrative of chaos in places that are out of control because it feeds his narrative. And we won't allow that to happen either.
All right, Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.